Good evening, everybody. This is Professor Roth. We will be doing Chapter 17 in the Ethics class, Managing a Diverse Workforce. This is a hot topic today, and we will be looking at some of the key elements and the key issues. The key learning objectives for tonight are knowing in what ways the workforce of the United States is diverse and evaluating how it might change in the future, and it changes every day. Understanding where women and person of color work, how much they are paid, and the roles they play as managers and business owners. Identifying the role government plays in securing equal employment opportunity for historically disadvantaged groups, and debating whether or not affirmative action is an effective strategy for promoting equal opportunity. Another hot topic, assessing the ways diversity confers a competitive advantage, formulating how companies can best manage workforce diversity, making the workforce welcoming, fair, and accommodating to all employees, understanding what policies and practices are most effective in helping today's employees manage the complex, multiple demands of work and family obligations, which is a great difficulty for many, especially for single moms or single dads who have to juggle full-time positions, depending on how many jobs they work, and be able to raise a family. Okay, so the first slide we're going to talk about is Chapter 17, slide number 3. Diversity refers to variations in the important human characteristics that distinguish people from one another. The primary dimensions are age, ethnicity. Ethnicity means the culture, the geographic area that people share in common and the common culture. Gender, mental or physical abilities. Race. Race means their physical features, whether they are African Americans, whether they are considered people from American Indian extraction, and of course sexual orientation, the gay and lesbian segments of society. Secondary dimensions such as characteristics as communication style, family status, and what one's first language is. Workforce diversity is diversity among employees of a business or organization, and today's workforce is definitely very diverse. And we have to be able to understand how to work with all people, whether or not we were ever exposed to their cultures or their ways of thinking or even their lifestyles. It is not something that we need to debate at work. It is not something that should be debated at work. It's a matter of being able to get along and get the job done without making an issue of people's beliefs, orientations, backgrounds, etc. The changing face of the workforce. Today, the U.S. workforce is as diverse as it ever has been, and it is becoming even more so. Consider the following workforce diversity trends. More women are working than ever before. This began in earnest in World War II. Immigration has profoundly reshaped the workplace. Ethnic and racial diversity is increasing. The workforce will continue to get older as medicine marches on, and as technology improves, people live longer, healthier lives, and the workforce gets older. And millennials are entering the workforce, and they have their way of thinking, and managers today have to be able to deal with all age groups. Gender and race in the workplace. As I mentioned before, following World War II, the proportion of women working outside the home has risen dramatically. This is commonly known as the Rosie the Riveter effect. If you ever seen posters from World War II, you see this attractive redhead in overalls with a kerchief on her head holding some sort of tool implement, and she symbolized the working woman of the time who helped the Allies, specifically in America with Rosie the Riveter, to be able to win against the Nazis and the Japanese and of course the Italians. So most dramatic increase have been married women, mothers of young children, and middle-class women working. Increasing professional, technical, and service jobs produced demand-side pull for women in the labor force. Labor force rates for minorities have always been high. Changes that wider range of jobs are available to minorities as discrimination barriers have fallen due to the various civil rights enactments. Let's skip to slide 7. Pay gap. Women and persons of color on average receive lower pay than white men do. The gap has narrowed to over the past 3 decades. For example, still in 2010, black men still earned only slightly more than 3/4 of what white men's pay. Black women earned about 70% and white women 81%. And we hope to see this trend improve greatly in the next decade. Now slide over to the 9th slide. The gender pay gap. Reason for pay gap. Some believe is evidence of sexual discrimination. Some believe is women's choice in pursuing lower-paying jobs or slower advancement. Others believe occupational segregation is occurring, inequitable concentration of a group in certain job categories. Women have made great strides in entering professional occupations. However, pink-collar ghetto still exists. Examples include preschool teachers and secretaries, which have a tremendous female population doing those jobs. Women and persons of color in management. Women have broken into management ranks. Tends to be, however, in occupations where women are numerous, like education and healthcare. I can tell you from my healthcare background, there are a lot of women in nursing, especially in nursing leadership. Only a very few women or persons of color have achieved highest positions in corporate America. Although women and minorities are as competent as white men in managing people in organizations, they rarely attain the highest positions in corporations. Let's play devil's advocate for a minute. Say that a woman, her main goal was to be a mom and to raise a family. It's quite difficult doing that being the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, as it is very demanding, requires travel, being up at all times, emailing on the weekend. It's very difficult to really give attention to children, especially multiple children, and a husband, and a household. So there's the other side that says the women don't want to do these jobs because it would interfere with their plans. I don't think there's any one reason. I think there are multiple reasons why women don't hold corporate positions. Yes, there's definitely discrimination, but to be fair and to be equal and to be balanced, there are also women that decide not to go into those positions because it would interfere with their plans and goals. Slide 11, the glass ceiling. These are invisible barriers that exist in reaching these higher levels positions, and this has been named the glass ceiling. Reason for the glass ceiling: glass walls, fewer opportunities to move into positions that lead to the top. Many women and minorities start in staff rather than line positions. Recruiters fill positions by word of mouth, and it's still the old boys network where women are shut out and not told of jobs. Recent advances show some cracking of the ceiling. We move to slide 13. Women and minority business ownerships. Some women and minorities have chosen to avoid the glass ceiling by opening up their own businesses. In 2010, for example, 40% of over 10 million U.S. businesses were owned or controlled by women. Although most single-headed firms are small, collectively they employed over 13 million people in the U.S. and generate over $1.9 trillion in sales. And in situations such as city contracts, many times bids will favor women-owned organizations or other minority type of situations. We move on to slide 14, women and minority business ownership. According to the Small Business Administration, there were around 5.8 million minority-owned businesses in the U.S. back in 2007, which of course has increased since then. Hispanic-owned businesses were the most numerous, followed by African-American and Asian-owned businesses, and I read that the Hispanic sector will be growing tremendously and will probably be the largest minority in the next few decades. Immigrants are responsible for a good share of the entrepreneurial spirit in the minority community. Immigrants are nearly 30% more likely to start a business than non-immigrants, especially in the Jewish community in the turn of last century, where Jews came from Europe. Most of them were religious Orthodox Jews, were forced to either keep the Sabbath and lose their jobs because there were no allowances for being off on Sabbath and Shabbos. As a result, many did not look for other jobs. They kept their jobs and did work on the Sabbath. However, few did not, and the ones that did not, many of them went into their own business. And somebody told me that the garment business is heavily represented by Jews because of that they went into their own businesses so that they could actually dictate the terms of their employment, when they work, how they work. This is one of the reasons why a lot of Jews went into their own businesses, to kind of combat the Sabbath issue which they faced. Slide number 15, equal employment opportunity. Government involvement in securing equal employment for all began in the 1960s on a large scale. It's defined as discrimination based on race, color, religion, gender, national origin, physical or mental disability, or age. In the U.S., it is prohibited in all employment practices. Government contractors must have written affirmative action plans detailing how they are working positively to overcome past and present effects of discrimination in the workforce. Women and men must receive equal pay for performing equal work, and employers may not discriminate on the basis of pregnancy. can't ask a question on an interview, ma'am, do you plan on being pregnant? How many children do you have? Are you currently pregnant? I even heard of one place where a woman went for a job interview. They asked her to take a pregnancy test. Super highly illegal practice. Definitely something that, very highly inappropriate on multiple levels. A couple of the enactments on slide 16, figure 17.4, major federal laws and executive orders prohibiting job discrimination. Some of them will mention the Equal Pay Act of 1963 mandates equal pay for substantially equal work by men and women. Civil Rights Act 1964 amended in 72, 91, and 2009 prohibits discrimination in employment based on race, color, religion, or sex, or national origin. Let's look at the Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978. Forbids employers to discharge, fail to hire, or otherwise discriminate against pregnant women. Here's another one, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities, requiring reasonable accommodations. Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993 requires companies with 50 or more employees to provide up to 12 weeks unpaid leave for illness, care of a sick family member, or the birth or adoption of a child. Many organizations now have not only maternity leave, but paternity leave, and which is for the father. Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008 prohibits the use of genetic information in employment decisions, which of course is a part of the HIPAA regulations, which is not really a part of this chapter. Affirmative action. Since the mid-1960s, government contractors have been required to have affirmative action plans. The purpose of this was to reduce job discrimination by encouraging companies to take positive steps to overcome past discriminatory employment practices. Affirmative action became increasingly controversial in the 1990s and 2000s. Some states passed laws banning it in public hiring. Opponents cite possibly of reverse discrimination because people that were not minorities felt boxed out. In the quest to help minorities, they created reverse discrimination. Some women and persons of color called for less emphasis on affirmative action, preferring to achieve personal success without preferential treatment. I have actually spoken to people of various extractions, African Americans, etc., and they all disliked unanimously the affirmative action. It kind of felt that it cheapened their worth, and it basically was a handicap kind of situation where that people felt bad for them, so they let them into the position. They wanted to do it on their own. One of them even told me that if, God forbid, my family member needs a doctor, I want the best doctor regardless of their orientation, their color, or whatnot. I don't want somebody who's allowed in because of that, and as a result, the standards were lowered for that. That's wrong. Everybody should be able to be held up to the same standards. However, the opportunity to achieve those standards should be equal to all, regardless of their race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. Moving along to slide 18. Sexual harassment occurs at work when any employee, woman or man, experiences repeated unwanted sexual attention, or when on-the-job conditions are hostile or threatening in a sexual way. It includes both physical contact, for example, suggestive touching, as well as verbal harassment, such as sexual innuendos, jokes, or propositions. It can also occur if a company's work climate is blatantly and offensively sexual or intimidating to employees. It is illegal, and the U.S. EEOC is empowered to sue on behalf of victims. The European Union recognized sexual harassment as a form of gender discrimination in 2002, required by its member states to bring their laws into compliance in 2005. Just to mention that sexual harassment occurs whether it is opposite genders, meaning a woman to a man to woman, or the same gender, a woman to woman, or a man to man. It doesn't matter. The workplace is a workplace. It is not a place where one should feel intimidated and made to feel nervous and not be able to function. Racial harassment, slide 19, is also illegal under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Under the EEOC guidelines, ethnic slurs, derogatory comments, or other verbal or physical harassment based on race are against the law if they create an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment or interfere with an individual's work performance. Slide 20, preventing sexual and racial harassment. In 1998, the Supreme Court ruled that companies could deflect lawsuits by taking two steps, and this is very important. In fact, New York City has been required that all organizations now have sexual harassment training. You have to develop a zero-tolerance policy on harassment and communicate it clearly to employees, establish a complaint procedure, including ways to report incidents without retaliation, and act quickly to resolve any problems. In addition, stated that companies that took such steps would be protected from suits by employees who claimed harassment, but it failed to use the complaint procedure. This way, you cover yourself. And I mentioned New York City is requiring now to have sexual harassment training. This will become law on April 1st, 2019. Moving along, slide 21. Diversity policies and practices. Well-run companies go beyond required legal actions to welcome employees of all backgrounds. Actions taken by companies to manage diversity effectively. They articulate a clear diversity mission, set quantitative objectives, and hold managers accountable. They spread a wide net in recruitment to find the most diverse possible pool of qualified candidates. They identify promising women and persons of color and provide them with mentors and other kinds of support. They set up diversity councils to monitor the company's goals and progress toward them. Slide 22, strategic advantages of managing diversity effectively. Companies that promote equal employment opportunity generally do better at attracting and retaining workers from all backgrounds because people feel safe and they want to work for a diverse company. Businesses with employees from varied backgrounds can often more effectively serve customers who are themselves diverse, and the global marketplace demands a workforce with language skills, cultural sensitivity, and awareness of national other differences across markets. Companies with effective diversity programs can avoid costly lawsuits and damage to their corporate reputations from charges of discrimination or cultural insensitivity, which is very important to be very, very careful not to hurt somebody. And everybody should understand a little bit about foreign cultures, just enough so that you don't offend anyone. Balancing work and life, slide 23. Changing demographics, including increasing number of dual-income families. You don't have the Leave It to Beaver model where mom stays home all day cooking and cleaning, and dad comes home at 5 or 6 o'clock and eats supper with everybody. Those days are long gone. Unfortunately, many parents have to work multiple jobs. I myself know that firsthand. My wife and I, we both work, and that's just the way it is. It's not something we want to do, but it's something that we have to do to be able to afford all that is needed in raising a family. So again, changing demographics, including increasing number of dual-income families, have led people to adopt a wide range of strategies for combining full and part-time work with the care of children, elderly relatives, and other dependents, making it work for employees trying to balance the complex, multiple demands of work and family life has become a major business challenge, but one that's worthy of tackling. Slide 24, child care and elder care. Types of programs companies are offering: child care, elder care for people who have elderly parents, parental and family leave, work flexibility, being able to work from home, different shifts, benefits to non-traditional families. Some employees have been reluctant to take advantages of work flexibility options for fear of being labeled mommy track or daddy track and then be boxed out of any opportunities for advancement. A shift in corporate cultures is needed to truly become a family-friendly company where men and women are fully supported in their efforts to balance work and family responsibilities. Domestic partner benefits, Exhibit 17.C, slide 25. Many corporations in the U.S. have begun to acknowledge differences in employee sexual orientation and gender identity. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender employees have become a vocal minority, winning important victories in the workplace. Recently, we've had a slew of issues with people identifying with other genders, using bathrooms that they would otherwise not use. And these are new issues, and companies are dealing with it. A 2012 report by the Human Rights Foundation found that 86% of the Fortune 500 companies included sexual orientation in their non-discrimination policy, and 60% provided health benefits to domestic partners and same-sex spouses. Lotus Development was the first major employer to offer spousal benefits to same-sex partners. It's followed by many others, including AT&T, Chase Manhattan, Microsoft, United Airlines, and the Big Three automakers. Other steps companies have taken to support their homosexual employees have included management training on sexual diversity issues, visible gay and lesbian advertising, and transgender inclusive health coverage. Thank you very much and have a good evening. This concludes Chapter 17. Be well.